Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the $1 Million Case Study, Season 4, episode number 10, where we're building and scaling a physical product business to $1 million in revenue. I'm joined by my co-host, Rolando Galeana.
Hey, how's it going, Greg? How's it going there, Lenny?
And this week we have on a special guest, Lenny.
Hey, I'm excited to be here, my very first $1 Million Case Study episode.
So today we're going to be covering product photography. We're going to be talking about main images and the requirements associated with them, how to do lifestyle imagery, packaging images, as well as infographics. So we brought on Lenny because he's our in-house video and photography expert to show us how it's done. But before we get started, Rolando, give us a quick update how our product is progressing.
No new updates, unfortunately, because of the delay for the Chinese holiday. However, we do go into mass production at the end of this week, so that's fantastic news.
That is great news. I'm excited to get this thing underway so we can start making some progress into getting it into Amazon. So Lenny, what do we need to know about product photography and more specifically our main image?
Great question. So, as most of you might know, the main image is super important. That's what catches people's eyes and that's why they click onto your listing. So Amazon has a few requirements for your main image. Firstly, it needs to be against a white background. Next, your product needs to take up 85% of that image, so it needs to be nice and big, and you kind of want that anyway. You want your image to be nice and big and stand out. The image also needs to be at least 1,000 pixels wide. We'll go into that a little bit more later, but essentially you want it to be quite big, and with cameras these days, they usually are much bigger anyway. And then one last thing that's not a specification as such, but is good to keep in mind is that your images appear as a square on the Amazon search page. So the more you can kind of fit it within that square, the larger it will appear and stand out on Amazon.
Now, I know this can seem a bit overwhelming for some of our viewers. Do you recommend to hire a professional or doing it yourself? Will that suffice?
Yeah, so of course I'm kind of biased because I've done a lot of photography in the past, and I do recommend if you have the budget that you can get some outstanding photos by using a professional photographer. We'll talk about some ways that you can do that, but what we really want to focus on this episode is the fact that you can in fact take really high quality images yourself, just using a smartphone, using lights around the house, and then something like a bed sheet. So we'll show you exactly how to do that step by step.
If you guys would rather hire a professional to do it, junglemarket.com is a great resource for pre-vetted Amazon experts who know how to specifically cater to the Amazon crowd. So they'll know all these requirements, they'll know how to take the best images, and we'll include a photography brief from the Jungle Market, and you can find that at junglescout.com/MDCS4-10.
Okay, so Lenny, you sold me on going about it and doing it myself. So where do I begin?
Well, a great place to start is just kind of planning out the types of shots that you want. You want to generate some ideas. There are a few different places that you can do it. The first one I'd recommend is just simply going to Amazon.com, searching for your product and seeing what images your competitors have used. So let's do that right now.
I'll go ahead and search for a keyboard tray. So the first thing that I notice here are there are a number of different types of product photography for the main. And let's just talk about Amazon's terms of service real quickly. Even though they're not strictly enforced, Amazon's terms of service says that you cannot use any type of drawings or designs or badges or additional watermarks or text on your images. So this example right here from Stand Steady, they have a little arrow here that shows that it slides in and out. This is technically against Amazon's terms of service. Another example with this one by Krager, it has their brand name and lifetime warranty written on the main image. And again, this is actually against Amazon's terms of service. Usually what happens is they'll just suppress your listing if you get caught with this, which isn't a huge deal, but you still might miss out on a day or two of sales. And here at Jungle Scout, we just believe in following Amazon's terms of service. We want to keep our account in health. They do allow cropping, but the way that it's phrased is it has to be minimal cropping and it can't deceive the customer. Stand Steady actually did a pretty nice job of adding some additional opacity or transparency to the desk to help customers understand that this keyboard tray clamps onto a desk, but the desk isn't included with it. Once you start including too much with your keyboard tray, or if it begins to deceive the customer into thinking more is included in the package than just your product, that's when you can start getting in trouble with Amazon.
Kind of like that example there where they've got the keyboard tray, they've got a keyboard, mouse, desk, they've even got a monitor. That's probably not the greatest example.
Exactly. That one's starting to kind of push the limits. And then if we
Yeah.
look at, if we look at an example like Vivo, they're doing it like completely white hat. They're following all of Amazon's terms of service. It's strictly just the product. They're not even using any propping with it. So it is okay to use minimal propping. Just keep in mind that you don't want to deceive the customers. And, that's also another good way to get bad reviews if you end up, your customers think they're going to get more than what they really are.
Okay, so now we want to kind of like plan out our shots. So if we start scrolling through, you'll see that this particular shot here that like Vivo has got a few times and a few of the others here, they've all got a very similar shot. So that's good because it gives us an idea of the type of shot that works. 45 degrees side on kind of angle, it captures the whole product. That's a popular shot that works, and that's like a good starting place. The good thing is that with a lot of those shots being similar, that might give us an opportunity to find a different, more creative angle that might stand out more.
Especially when you're doing your own product photography, the more the better. At the end of the day, you would rather have more options to choose from and try to find which one looks best on your product or on the product page. And this helps you down the road be able to split test different images to see which ones get the most clicks.
Yeah, that's a good point. While we're talking about planning out your shots in advance, I wouldn't get too overwhelmed or scared by that, because even a professional photographer, their whole process is just to take photos from lots of different angles. A lot of the time they don't know exactly what is going to work. It's through the process of just taking lots of different shots and reviewing them that you'll find something that works really well. So this is just a starting point. Don't worry if you can't nail down exactly what angles to take straight away.
When you're thinking about these different shots, consider doing something a little bit more creative or trying to think outside the box a little. A good example of this is one time I saw a main image of a pack of chia seeds, and the seeds were spilling out of the package and they spelt the word chia. This is actually within Amazon's terms of service because it's just the product shown in the main image. But right away on that Amazon page, it drew your eyes to it. And right away you started looking at that listing instead of the competitors' listings. So this is of course going to differ for every different product. However, be thinking about what other types of creative angles you can use for your particular product.
All right, that sounds great for our main image. Let's talk a little bit about lifestyle images. So what do you need to pull that off?
So lifestyle images are essentially where you show your product being used. These are really fun because you get to see real people using the product, and this is a good chance to kind of show off kind of the target audience or the typical person that would be using your product. The idea here is that you want the customer that's looking at your listing to kind of see themselves using that product. So that's why lifestyle images are really great.
For a good example of a lifestyle image, let's take a look at one of the previous $1 million case study products, the Jungle Snug Hooded Baby Towels. So in this, I have a little baby wearing the hooded baby towel. She's obviously smiling and happy. And the idea here is we want the parent to be able to see this and think, wow, if I were to have that towel when my baby got it out of the bath, instead of being cold and crying, they'd be all warm and snuggly and happy. Another example is this one. And this is meant to show, again, a mom that's happy that her kid's wearing this. The kid's happy, mom's happy. We have a little approved by mom's badge on here. So just be thinking about, who can see themselves in the shoes of the person either using or wearing your product.
So really it's about trying to evoke an emotion. If you can create a really nice lifestyle image and evoke that emotion within someone, we all know that, emotion is what helps people buy. So that's why lifestyle images are so great.
Another good place for product photography inspiration is Google Image Search. So we can go to Google Image Search, type in keyboard tray, and from that get some good inspiration of what other types of photography people have taken for our keyboard tray.
So there are a ton of places where you can get photography inspiration. Drop in the comments below your favorite.
All right, so let's plan out our specific shots, Lenny. What do we need? Where do we begin? What next?
All right, so the specific things that you need. Firstly, you need the product, of course, so having a sample of your product ready to go. You'll need a friend or family member that's willing to model the item for you. You'll also need a location. And so the location will be dependent, of course, on your product. So that'll either be in an interior. If it's going to be interior inside, you want that to be nicely well lit. Or if you're going to be shooting outside, one thing to keep in mind is that you'll get the best light at the start of the day and at the end of the day. The middle of the day, the light is very harsh. You get bad shadows on your subjects and so forth. But now coming back to the model and the location, here's where I'd kind of like tap into who's the target audience. What's the typical kind of person that you would want in this photo? I would imagine from the keyboard tray that it would be like an office professional, someone like that. Would you say that's correct, Rolando?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an office product, so that would be our target demographic. You got it.
And just for some other examples or other context, when we did our sleeping bag, this guy was like out in the forest using, camping. When we did our hooded baby towel, the babies were inside a bathtub or in like a bath environment. So it's very dependent on what your product is. Yeah, I think a home office or like an office environment works really well for this one.
So a few of the other types of images that you could use are infographic style images, packaging images, and then also images that show off a particular feature of your product. Because we're doing customer-driven innovation, where we're taking a product and improving upon it, those are key things that you want to highlight in your product photos. So Rolando, with the keyboard tray, what are the differences with our version that we really want to highlight?
Yeah, so what we discovered by just going in and looking at the reviews is that, number one, a lot of people were complaining about the material, that it was chintzy, it was cheap. So we want to emphasize the high quality features that we have on our product. The fact that it's made out of bamboo, the fact that it's made out of MDF.
Okay, cool. So instantly I'm sort of picturing maybe like a close-up of the board itself, and then you could have like a little circle in the corner that says high quality bamboo or what the material is made of. What else you got, Rolando?
So one of the other added benefits that we created is this nice form-fitting foam for your wrist. Like we call it the wrist rest. We definitely want to highlight that.
Yeah, again, easily, I'd picture like a close-up shot or a shot that really highlights the wrist rest. Again, maybe some accompanying text that points out why ours is better. But yeah, really showing that feature off.
Another thing that we did was we changed the size of the board itself and the size of the clamp, because those were two complaints that we kept seeing as well. So it's just going to be a lot more ergonomic and form-fitting.
Great, that really, really helps, because again, a close-up of the clamp, and perhaps like a little arrow that shows the size. One of the concerns was that we wanted it higher so it wouldn't be hitting people's knees. You could actually have a person in there so that you can actually see someone's knee, and you can see that the clamp is well above them. So clearly demonstrating how ours is different. In addition to those, another image that I've seen work really well is a comparison chart, where you basically show your features versus those of the competitors. A good example of this is the Jungle Snugs again.
Yeah, on the Jungle Snugs competitive matrix, you can see we called out the different features that made our product better than the competitors, and that just makes it really clear to the shopper which one's better, and we're doing the comparative shopping for them.
And lastly, the other type of photo you could include is a packaging shot. So especially if you've got customized packaging, it's just a cool chance to show it off, and it can also sort of improve the perceived value of your brand. So to sum it up, you've got your main image against a white background, you've got your lifestyle shots that show the product being used, you've got specific featured images that show off various parts of your product, a packaging shot, which is kind of an optional, and perhaps a comparison chart, which essentially you would just use like a lifestyle shot in the background and then place the chart on top. So we've got our list of images. What do you reckon, Greg?
Go take some pictures. My
Let's do
iPhone's
it.
ready.
Man, I really wish I could be there with you guys, but I can't. So why don't you guys just ping me when you're done, and we'll wrap this up.
Cool, sounds good. All right, Laney, so why don't you walk us through what we have set up here?
Okay, so this is very DIY. So what we started out with is 2 lamps, a bed sheet, And so what we did is that we pinned one end of the bed sheet to a table so that it has height, and then drop that down onto the floor. So that forms the backdrop of our photos, so that no matter what angle we take the photo from, there's a white background up high. Then when it got down onto the ground, we've kind of crinkled it, but essentially we're trying to pull it out, keep it as wrinkle-free as possible, because all those little wrinkles cause shadows and that appears in the shot. So we've tried to stretch it out as much as possible. Then we've placed our product in the middle. What I did here was that I found this little doohickey to elevate our product a little bit. The reasoning for that was, if you can elevate your product a little bit and kind of separate it from the backdrop, which is the sheet here, that essentially, basically that creating that separation just helps make the background disappear. It also means that the lights can cancel out the shadows a little bit better. So now we've got our product on the sheet, we've moved the two lights into place, and we're moving them in from each side. And so the idea is that if you've just got one light in one direction, it's creating shadows over the other side. So by having the second light, it then sort of cancels out those shadows. So hopefully when I take some images, there won't be too many, or the shadows won't be too bad all around. And so I think now it's really just a matter of getting out my iPhone and starting to experiment with the angles. I don't know if these lights are going to be in the right spot. It'll just be a matter of playing and moving the lights around as I experiment with the photos. Is there anything I missed, Greg?
No, I think that covers it. I'd love to see what kind of shots you come up with.
All right, let's get into it.
Hey, how'd it go, guys?
Yeah, it went really good. We got a bunch of good photos, and now it's time to do some editing.
Let's get to it.
And because we shot our photos on the iPhone, that's where we're going to edit them. I always just use the inbuilt smartphone editor. However, there are a ton of different apps out there. In fact, I'd love to hear from you guys. What's your favorite photo editing app for the smartphone? Drop it in the comments below. But for the purposes of our photos, let's jump into the iPhone now and I'll show you how I edit them. So this is one of my favorite images here, and I'm just going to use the basic iPhone editor. So go to edit, and now I'm going to come down to this button here and go to light. The first thing I want to do is change the exposure. So that's just going to be the overall brightness of the image. Remember, the key here is that we want to eliminate as much or make the background as white as possible and make it look like there's nothing there. So I'm just gonna pump the exposure up without affecting the image. So even just that alone does a really great job, and it looks really nice and clean. So now I'm going to play with some of these other settings. So I'd play with the exposure. I'd also look at the contrast. So if I bump up the contrast, again, that does a really great job. In this example, I probably wouldn't do too much more with the light, but the other two that you could play with are the highlights and the shadows. If you've got lots of shadows, you can sort of like play with this just a little bit, and that gets rid of them or softens the shadows. If you do it too much, you'll lose the blacks will become a bit milky. So just play with the shadows a little bit if you need it. But in this case, I think this looks pretty good. So now I'm just going to crop it in as much as possible to make the image as square as possible.
What I really like about editing on the iPhone is A, it's very easy to do, and B, you can just play with all those different things as much as you want, right? I mean, you brought up the contrast and the shadows and the exposure, but if you want to start messing with some of the other settings, feel free to play with them, right? You can just kind of slide them back and forth until you've found the photo that you like the appearance of the best.
Yeah, exactly. And you can just easily undo any of the changes you've made. In this situation, there's not too much color, but if you've got a product that has some color in it, you might want to bump up the saturation a little bit and just make it look a bit more vibrant.
Overall, I'm pretty impressed by this, Lenny. I have to say, with just an iPhone, a couple desk lamps, and a white sheet, you were able to create photos that look pretty professional, right?
Yeah, I'm really impressed with this too, and that's perfectly usable for Amazon. Whether, you could stick with this photo for a long time, or if you just want to take these photos so that you can get that up on your listing while you wait for professional. Either way, great image to use.
Yeah, and if we wanted to do lifestyle imagery, we would essentially use this same process, right? We would find a model like we spoke about, make sure we have good lighting, whether that's indoor lighting with some additional light sources, or outside when the sun is either at dusk or dawn. Is that
Yes,
right?
that's correct.
Those are the best time to take photos. And then same thing, you can edit them in your phone just like you did with this particular main image.
All right, so that's how you can do it on a smartphone, but you can also edit your images on a computer. So if you're not an expert at Photoshop, don't worry. There's a really great free tool called GIMP that's available for PC and Mac. It's very popular, it's easy to use, and it gives you all the same tools. So you can adjust the contrast, saturation, very similar to how I did it on the iPhone. Now, another great resource if you want to add text or shapes onto your images, you can go to canva.com. That's a great tool to add all of those extra elements. And again, it's very easy to use.
So Lenny, we've spoken about a lot throughout this episode. Do we want to just do a quick overview of everything required?
Yeah, so again, what we've covered today is taking your main image against a white background. We've covered getting lifestyle photography. We've covered taking photos that highlight sections of your product to the customer. We've talked about using text and shapes, for instance, on your photos as well, and creating things like comparison charts. But one thing to keep in mind above all of this is that you don't need to have all of these photos at once. Ultimately, you need one really good main image photo to get people to your listing. You can have up to 9, and we do recommend that eventually you aim to fill up all those spaces, because the more photos you have, the more opportunities it gives you to sell your product to the customer. But you don't need 9 straight up. Definitely get 1, aim to have like a couple of lifestyle, or even if you can't do that straight away, have a few different angles of your product. So just start with whatever you can, and then over time build them up.
Yeah, you can edit your listings as many times as you want, for as long as you want. So don't feel like the first time you create your listing that everything needs to be there, right?
Yeah.
If you have like 2, 3 good images, that's a perfectly fine start, and you can always add more down the road as you take lifestyle imagery or you create one of these competitive matrices. And so you don't really have to worry about it. Don't stress out about that. The most important thing throughout the $1 Million Case Study is just getting started and going on and taking those next steps. We can always optimize things down the road.
Yeah, I totally agree. So that wraps up the different ways that you can do DIY product photography yourself and still get really great results.
Rolando, what are the action items for this week?
All right, so this week's action items, you're going to start off by completing the product photography checklist. Once you've completed that, you should be able to furnish your main photo, your lifestyle photo, and if it's applicable, a packaging photo, as well as an infographic photo. Now, if you're not doing this yourself, don't worry. We have a download for you for the product photography brief. This is something that will walk you through on setting up the photos and getting them over to a professional.
And even if you're just looking for professional help to do the editing or background removal, that's also another great service that you can find at junglemarket.com. So guys, thank you very much for tuning in for episode 10 of the $1 Million Case Study. I've really enjoyed it. Lenny, thank you very much for coming on. If you guys are enjoying the $1 Million Case Study, go ahead and hit that subscribe button on YouTube to make sure you're notified of all upcoming videos, and give us a thumbs up if you liked this particular episode. Thanks guys. Thanks Rolando.
Take care.
Keep crushing it, Freedom Builders.